Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college sports fans. I almost said college football fans there, Spence, but college sports fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show, and we're going to have a wide-ranging but compact show here today with my co-pilot, Spencer Holbrook. Hadn't been on here for a while, Spencer. You still remember how to fly this thing if I become incapacitated?
Might need a couple pointers on takeoff, but I think that once we get to cruising altitude, we'll be all right, Tim.
It ain't the takeoff, it's the landing. Remember, it's always the landing, man. That's what matters most. Anybody can take off in an airplane. I did that when I was 16. But I digress. Bottom line is I want to hit on a couple of subjects here today. And my guest, my extended interview guest today is Neil Shipley, the golfer from Ohio State who kind of shocked the world to a certain extent by finishing second in last year's U.S. Amateur Championship. But he had a shot in the semifinals that, you know, just resonates, man, with folks, with golf fans, even to today. But as a result of that second place finish in U.S. Amateur, he got a he got an e-ticket to the 2024 Masters. He's going to be playing in that in what, a couple of weeks. I think you and I both got to talk to him in the last couple of weeks, Spence. But can you imagine you're going to get to play in your first Masters, just what that would mean? He's already had a couple of practice rounds, as he and I talk about, but so it won't be his first trip down Magnolia Lane, but it'll be his first trip in competition. Can you imagine, man, what must be going on in that young man's head?
Yeah, Tim, you talked to him before I did, but it's interesting. Me and a couple other reporters talked to him last week, and I asked him. I said, "What is it going to mean to finally step there?" And he said, "Well, I've already played 100 holes."
Yeah,
So but so that shine's kind of worn off of it. But I'm not sure how it could. Everybody's dream is to play Augusta National, and
yeah.
he gets to do it not only for hopefully 4 days, because you hope that he does well enough to make the cut as an amateur, but he also gets to play 5 practice rounds. So he'll have an entire 7 days worth at least of rounds at Augusta. And,
No matter what. Yeah,
yeah, small time guys like us could only dream of playing once there. So,
yeah.
for in that aspect, it's a dream come true. Then you look at the fact that he gets to compete with the greatest golfers in the world on the biggest stage in the sport at such a young age. I can't imagine what's going through his head, and it's got to be special for him.
Yeah, and the guy that beat him last year in the U.S. Amateur Championship was Nick Dunlap. Who's had some acclaim and fame and stuff. But I remind him as you listen to my interview with him, folks. I remind him that taking laps around Indianapolis Motor Speedway when the stands are empty is one thing, but doing it when the stands are full, as any driver will tell you, it's like the speedway gets about 30 feet narrower. It's like, am I going to make it in turn one? That's what Augusta National is like, from a practice round to a competitive round. So, we'll get to that in a moment. Uh, First, I want to hit bases with you, Spence, on a couple of Ohio State sports related things. Number one, you and I are going to talk for a few minutes about spring practice here. About basically who you expect to step up in the next 3 weeks, because they've got as we record this, they've got 10 practices left in a 15 practice spring, with a quarterback battle still going on, et cetera. We'll get to that in a moment. But if I told you back in early February, taking a snapshot and said the Ohio State women's team would not be playing at this point and Ohio State men's team would be in basketball, what would have been your reaction?
Yeah, a little bit stunned, right? Because of the way that the two seasons were going. Ohio State women's basketball didn't lose in 2024 until March. They didn't
Right?
lose until they went to Iowa, and the regular season finale, they won 15 straight. All of those came in the calendar year 2024. They lose at Iowa, then they kind of fizzle out in the Big Ten tournament, without really doing any damage, losing the quarterfinals in the first game there, and then you're on your own home court. You've got a completely sold out gym yesterday, or sorry, on Sunday against Duke, and it kind of just melted away, and it was stunning, and it was pretty surreal to be there in the shot and watch it all unfold as it happened, because so many people expected huge things out of the Buckeyes, and maybe that was part of the letdown. Maybe that was part of the fall, is the expectations. But this Ohio State men's team has completely done the opposite. As the expectations continued to dim and dim, the light started shining brighter for them. And I think it's a credit to Jake Diebler, but it's also a credit to the players for kind of playing with reckless abandon and not
Yeah.
really worrying about the result and just going out and playing basketball. Whereas there were times late in the season, as we started covering the women's team more, where you could see maybe them tighten up a little more, and that comes with the territory. But yeah, it just really surprising. I was blown away by how great Kevin McGuff and the women's team handled Sunday's defeat. You couldn't ask for a better group to represent Ohio State, but also you were hoping that they were going to get to Cleveland and represent Ohio State in the Final Four for just
Yeah.
a good time in program history. And
Yeah.
they're going to be staying at home.
Yeah. I mean, double digit lead to a double digit loss, right? I mean, whatever it was, you can't make stuff like that up. And they did it at home, and it's that's going to sting. Kevin McGuff, I think laid it out. That's going to sting for a while. And the thing about it is, when one team loses just a notch of intensity and the other one notches it up, ratchets it up, you could see what can happen even in the women's game. So that's unfortunate. The men's game, Jake Diebler, that's going to turn out to be a hell of a decision by Ross Bjork to hire Jake Diebler. I mean, obviously there was input from others, but finally it's Ross Bjork who pulled the trigger, Ohio State's new athletic director. And I don't know. I just like the way this team is playing right now. It's too bad they had that swoon. But if they hadn't had that swoon, they probably wouldn't. Jake Diebler probably wouldn't be the head coach now. Well, that's a stupid comment to say. Of course, he would not be. But
Yeah.
sometimes good things come out of bad situations, and I think we're seeing that the way this team is playing. And Jameson Battle just doesn't want to quit playing. It appears as an Ohio State Buckeye. So we'll see where that carries them. They're in the quarterfinals of the NIT as we record this. Are playing on Tuesday night, hosting Georgia, with a chance to go to the semifinals of the NIT, which, by the way, most people believe is still played in New York City, but no, it'll be played at Hinkle Fieldhouse, home of the Butler Bulldogs in Indianapolis. Classic, Hoosiers, the movie Hoosiers, et cetera. Everybody understands what Hinkle Fieldhouse means to the mystique of college basketball and even high school basketball. So, hey, one quick thing that stood out about the men's team. I know, we talk about them. I've been saying now they have learned how to finish. They didn't know how to finish in the month of January or early February under Chris Holtmann, just like a year ago when they went on that big swoon. But other than that, what has stood out about the Jake Diebler led Buckeyes from your vantage point?
I just think that I don't think that they were not bought in to Chris Holtmann. I don't want it to come off that way at all, but I think there
Yeah.
was just something was a little off there. But between, the level of intensity in the second half of games and when he was in charge. And I think it is just that loose nature that they're playing with. Jake Diebler has them believing. He's got them, he recruited all these guys. And so it's not one of those things where I don't know if this team really looks at him still as the head coach subconsciously, where they think of him as like that assistant who is always there for him, who's going to, be a player's coach, who's going to let them play freely and allow them to make some mistakes. Because Tim, they're playing really well, but they've still made some mistakes here.
Oh
But
yeah.
it
Yeah.
looks like they're playing a little bit more freely. They're not afraid to overcome mistakes. Whereas before, I think they were afraid to make mistakes. And there's a huge difference between being afraid to make mistakes and being willing to overcome mistakes. And I think that's where Jake Diebler has them. He's got him believing. He's got him thinking that, hey, we can make the NCAA tournament. They did that. They tried as hard as they could. They came up just short. They probably should have beat Illinois, who I picked to make to the Final Four, and that could have got them in the tournament. Now you see what they're doing in the NIT and saying, hey, if this team would have gotten the tournament, they might have been able to win a game or two. And so,
I thought the way they finished, they deserved to be in the tournament with 20 wins. Definitely ahead of Michigan State, in my opinion, who they beat on Michigan State's floor in the last 2 weeks of the regular season. So, but you're right. Yeah, what stands out to me is their basically more than just their defense, their half court defense late in games. And what bothered you about the Chris Holtmann led team is the wrong guy got the ball in his hands at the wrong time. In some of those finishes where they fell short back in January and February. It just seems like the right guy is getting the ball in his hands at the right time, and that's coaching, man, as much as anything else. Defense and getting the ball to the hot hand, one form or fashion, is what stands out about this team when it matters. And there is a don't quit attitude to them for sure. Whereas it looked like a little bit of a panic situation a lot of times late in games under Chris Holtmann during the swoon. Not that they didn't have some big wins under Chris Holtmann. I don't mean it that way, but when it mattered, they didn't. You can't have losing streaks like that. I don't want to go on and on. I just like the way this team is playing right now. Hey, the women's hockey team at Ohio State wins its second national championship in 3 years. Uh, That's impressive, man. As I said, it's the embers of a dynasty. It's really the building or the foundation has been laid for a dynasty. 2 out of 3, 2 out of 3 is a hell of a run. You agree? And I mean, granted, women's hockey still hasn't swept the college sports nationwide, but it's still remarkable achievement, right? For the way this coach has turned this program around.
Yeah, I mean, 2 out of 3 is incredible. And the way that they play, they're fun to watch. If you watch the games, I watched a little bit of the final on Sunday. It was a busy day for Ohio State athletics, and
Yeah,
there's much more than just the football program, right? We always think of Ohio State and the horseshoe and everything, but you got the women's basketball team, and then you've got the women's ice hockey team, and they're fun to watch. They play really really good hockey, sound hockey, and she knows what she's doing, Tim. Nadine Mazzarell. She knows what
yeah,
she and to build a program like this, I think that it's one of the best hires that Gene Smith has made in his career here. And that's including basketball and football and the lacrosse program, which is completely turned around and it now has its own building over there, and keeping Ty Tucker and the tennis program happy, and so many different things. The fencing program, the pistol program wins titles. Like so many things go into this athletic program, and nobody really thinks about some of these lower sports but or non-revenue sports, I should say.
non-revs, yeah,
But like Gene Smith found a coach who's won 2 national titles in the last 3 years. That's
yeah.
remarkable. And so, credit to the entire athletic department for not just, having a women's ice hockey program, but putting weight behind the women's ice hockey program, making sure they're a priority. And when you prioritize programs, they can give you big time rewards. And
Yeah.
they've prioritized the women's basketball program. They've prioritized the women's ice hockey program. They're prioritizing lacrosse right now. It looks like the track program is doing pretty well. Softball and baseball are making strides that maybe we didn't see in the not so distant past. So like Ohio State athletics is always the gold standard in most sports, but like you're starting to see some of these non-revenue sports really take some jumps that Gene Smith really wanted to see as his career comes to a close here at Ohio State, and the women's ice hockey program probably the best example of that.
Yeah, I'm going to run a little later this week, or I'm going to run a little excerpt I had from Ross Bjork. That I question I asked him at the Jake Diebler introductory press conference as the new basketball coach about people think of Ohio State, some places like Ohio State, Alabama, etc., as football schools. Well, look at Alabama in basketball right now again, but just look at Ohio State, and he has a great answer to that. And basically, to paraphrase his answer is, we're going to give you the wherewithal uh, to be not just show up, to be competitive, to compete for championships. Now it's up to you to do it, meaning the coaching staff and those programs. And you're seeing firsthand that's been Gene Smith's philosophy also. We're going to give you the proper wherewithal. Now you turn it into a championship run. And I don't think it's asking too much when you consider what Ohio State pumps into most of these sports, not the least of which is men's basketball. Men's basketball sort of pays for itself, but it's the only other one other than football, really. But just the expectation that comes with that, and coaches and teams are delivering. Now it's time for men's basketball to step up and do that starting next year. Heck, they may even do it this year. And NIT title is nothing to laugh at or nothing to snivel at. I mean, it's remarkable, and I think Ohio State's right in there. They've got the capability of winning this thing. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, it's postseason basketball, right? So
Yeah,
if you're playing in the postseason and you're playing for something, and Jake Diebler's done a great job of getting the guys to buy into this, you're playing for something.
yeah,
It's not the national championship, but guess what? It's something. And I don't know if they'll hang a banner if they win the NIT because it's not something that Ohio State wants to strive for. But if there's a trophy in front of you, go win it. And I think that's important. And to
yeah,
your point, Tim, like Ohio State, I think better than it ever has is realizing that, you know, if you pump resources relative to the competition in that specific sport, if you pump the resources necessary into a sport, you will see success. Again, the
yeah,
women's ice hockey program, the lacrosse program, the women's basketball program. Do it to the men's basketball program the way that you just did the football program, and the men's basketball program will become more of a revenue sport than it has been. And I know
Yeah.
that it already is a big time revenue sport, but like, when you see the shot as empty as it was there in February, then it becomes a little less of a revenue sport. So, pump those resources in, get Jake Keebler what he needs. And I don't think it'll hurt anybody if he goes out and sets the tone with an NIT title and says, "Hey, we won one. Let's go win the big one now." I
Yeah,
think it's a good place
absolutely.
to start.
Well, for the guys returning too, it'll be a major pump. I mean, it definitely will because as a group, you banded together the last 8 games of the regular season, and then into the NIT, and showed what you were all about, and but also showed you could finish games. Man, there's a pride that comes with winning games the hard way, and in my opinion, this Ohio State men's basketball team has gotten its act together in that regard. Who knows whether they'll finish this thing out? Uh, we'll see. Well, let's get to the main event. Speaking of the main event, let's go to the marquee and look what's up at top. And football's always up at top at Ohio State. Not that Ohio State is a football school, as I just stepped on my foot, with that line earlier, only because I just like to point that out to people. The resources are there for all of these teams to excel. Football, definitely, as they head into basically the third week of spring practice this week. They've already got 5 practices in the books. They've got 10 left. Spence, what are you interested in seeing getting clarified? I mean, obviously, we'd like to see the quarterback battle figured out in the spring, especially between Will Howard and Devin Brown. I don't know if that will get done. We'll see. But other than that, what is that one battle that's got to get figured out over the next 10 weeks?
Well, I might surprise some people here, Tim, because most people say offensive line. I think actually there's quite a bit of clarity on the offensive line right now. Luke Montgomery appears to be settling in at that guard spot. The only person who's really going to, I think,
Right
unseat
guard. Yeah.
that right guard spot is Josh Fryer, who could slide in there and play guard if Tegra Shabola becomes what they want him to become at tackle. That's
Right.
basically the only outcomes that we have left on this offensive line. There's obviously a battle at center, but Seth McLaughlin, I think, is going to end up winning that battle. He's too experienced. He's a really good player, and the Buckeyes are confident that his snapping issues are behind him. So, look, I know that that's saying what I'm not worried about, but the offensive line appears to have some clarity. So now I want to see linebacker. What is going on at linebacker? Because the last 2 people that I've talked to in the building have both told me the same name, Arvell Reese. And he has been an absolute animal, according to a couple people I've talked to, since the start of spring practice. Well, if that's true, Tim, then what are they going to do at linebacker? Because you move Sonny Styles down there, and he has to be on the field. Cody Simon came back to lead the unit. He has to be on the field. If Arvell Reese pushes to a spot where he has to be on the field, and Cody and CJ Hicks takes the steps that we expect him to be taking, and Jim Knowles has talked about him taking, what are they going to do here at linebacker? And is James Laurinaitis forced into a 4, 5, 6-man linebacker rotation? Is that a good thing for Ohio State moving 16, 17 games? Is it a bad
Let me
thing?
interrupt. That James Laurinaitis wants 4 linebackers that he can count on coming out of the spring. So that's a great development, in my opinion. But go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's a great development, but it's fascinating to me. You move Sonny Styles down there because maybe you weren't sure how the linebacker depth chart was going to shake out, and you wanted another body in there to really know that you had it set there. They even looked at transfer portal guys. I remember in January they hosted a guy who ended up at TCU, Caleb Elam-Zor from Cal, because
Yeah.
they weren't sure if they needed to boost the linebacker room. Well, now as we sit here on March 25th, it's completely changed, and this linebacker room looks like it's so deep that they're going to have issues finding time for each of these guys. And I
Yeah.
think that's such a good thing. And obviously, it's a spring glow right now. Some of these guys are getting that spring glow.
Right. Yeah,
But
I was all over CJ Hicks this time a year ago, man.
yeah.
Go
So,
ahead.
there is that spring glow that you do worry about. Maybe if it wears off a little bit, then you run into some trouble when you get into August and it's time to actually prepare for games. But they've got a good runway to get there with that 3-game slate to start the season. Not the non-con is really weak. And, that's a good buildup for these guys to figure out the rotation. But in the meantime, it seems like there's almost a log jam at the top with guys who need to be on the field. I think that's a great thing, but I'm super intrigued to see it play out, especially Saturday when we get in there to watch it Student Appreciation Day.
Yeah. And, Ryan Day has alluded to this. James Laurinaitis alluded to this. Jim Knowles, the defensive coordinator, has alluded to this. I mean, if things go their way, um, they've got a plan. They've got to have a logistical plan for 16 games minimum. It could be 17 if they don't make the whatever it turns out to be, whether 2 teams or 4 teams get a bye. I think 4 teams get a bye this year, right, out of the 12-team field. But you've got to have a plan that could possibly get you through 17 games, because you would play 4 extra games to get to the national championship if you don't make the top 4 in the college football playoff rankings, because you'd play in that first weekend when the top 4 get a bye. That's what Ryan Day alluded to the other day. It's very, very important. You're trying to be good enough to be considered one of the teams that gets the bye in the first round of the college football playoff. But yeah, you've got to have 4. You got to have minimum 4 linebackers. We've seen guys go up and down, et cetera. That's why it's imperative. You're right, Arvell Reese. I was just thinking about him last night. It's funny you brought that up before we recorded this. There's a guy that was almost a forgotten soul in some respects this time a year ago, and now we're talking about the way he is coming on. I think it's huge for the depth there, and of course you got Gabe Powers also. There's a 5th guy that is interesting in that linebacker room. So you're right. I mean, you look at I'm not saying right guard's a glamour spot, but that's a definite. They got to get that figured out, because they've got a right tackle in Josh Fryer, who I think played well last year. Not great sometimes, but well most of the year. But they've got to get that right side of the offensive line figured out, because that's the difference between them being really good and a great offense. I think you agree with that, right? I think they're going to end up with a I was going to say decent. I think with a really good quarterback minimum out of this quarterback derby between Will Howard and Devin Brown. And I think Devin Brown's definitely in it to win it, meaning, he's not stepping back. He's not stepping aside to the transfer, which I think is going to enhance the game, Will Howard's game. And then we know the running back situation with Ryan Day now coaching the running backs. Hey, what's your take on that, man? I mean, some people have used that opening to get themselves a raise where they're already coaching. Not the least of what I thought by this time we'd be talking about DeMarco Murray leading this running back corps. And of course, that didn't happen last week. He's staying in Oklahoma. Just what's your take on that whole situation? And do they need a running back coach before spring is over?
I think they do, Tim, just to get somebody in there to show not Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. I don't think Ohio State's worried about those guys, but to show Dallin Hayden that there's a plan for him with a new running backs coach, to show somebody who left home and is so far from home to compete in his first spring. James Peoples, like, hey, you're the future of the running back room, and here's why. Here's who was going to be leading the way for you. Sam Williams-Dixon, here's who's going to teach you, what it takes to be a college running back at a high level. I think they do need that guy so he can show them that in the spring and not just tell them in the summer. And I think that's imperative. So I think they need one before the spring's over to at least go through a few spring practices. And, I thought maybe DeMarco Murray was going to be that guy as well. But I don't know as much if it was just a leverage play, because I do think there was mutual interest there. But when it comes down to it, he ends up signing an extension at Oklahoma. Pete Nakos did a great job reporting that for On3. He signed an extension to Oklahoma, and now Ohio State is back to some names. There are some names that I believe Ohio State has serious interest in. There are names that I think are interested in Ohio State. I'm not willing to say those names yet because, it's always, what we say kind of carries some weight. I don't want a clip to be made and then all of a sudden somebody says they're the front runner based on what I said.
Right.
But, you know how that is. You've been doing this for 41 years, Tim.
Right. I mean, I know. I mean, and some guys, I mean, there is a list out there of some sort for Ryan Day, and he's trying to hire the best running back coach he can find. Well, that's subjective. That's what Ryan Day is talking about, because it sure looked like they had zeroed in on a guy, and then that guy turned around, and I'm not blaming him. I'm not blaming Ryan Day either, because you're going after established guys, and it's tough to pry those guys away, right?
Yeah, and I put this on the Lettermen Lounge message board on Sunday. As good as the coaching pool is for Ohio State, where Ohio State wants to be and who Ohio State wants to hire, if a guy has interest from Ohio State, the program that he's at currently is going to do everything it can to keep him around. Sure. And if that means making somebody the highest paid assistant on the staff as a running backs coach, they want to keep him around. You know why? Because you have a guy now who Ohio State wanted. And Ohio State is almost the gold standard of college football, right up there with Alabama and Georgia. So, if Ohio State wants a guy, he's going to be highly coveted by the program who he's already with to keep him. And so this is not as easy as everyone thinks it is. Hey, you're Ohio State, go get whoever you want. Well, it's
Right.
said than done because, some of these programs are willing to give the Brinks truck to their running backs coach to keep him around so he doesn't take the Ohio State job. And as much money as Ohio State has, it still isn't going to get in a bidding war for a guy who was second or third on its list. So
Right.
I think that it's an interesting time for Ryan Day. He's got to be careful with how he navigates this search. Um, he's got to be calculated. He's got to keep it in house. Ohio State, to its credit, and as somebody who's been trying to report on this as much as I can and give people as much access as we can give them. Ohio State's been keeping this pretty close to the vest, and I applaud Ohio State for that. They know what they're doing. They know how to lead a search, and they're not giving much info out. I will say that it's been kind of tricky trying to navigate where Ohio State's been stepping.
Yeah, I'll tell you now, I mean, a guy that I'm intrigued by that, seems to be on the list or at least be under consideration is Curtis Looper from Missouri, for example. I like that guy. I mean, we got to know Missouri last year, but before they played in the Cotton Bowl against Ohio State, and they've got some interesting dudes on their staff, and that's definitely one of them. So that's a name to at least keep in mind. But you're right, where they end up finally going with this, that remains to be seen. Maybe we'll talk about it next week on my Tim May show. What do you think?
Yeah, that sounds great. Maybe they'll make it higher by then. Maybe the white smoke will come
That's
out
what
of
I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. Pull the trigger, get the guy on campus, etc. I think you're exactly right too. I think it might be important for the guy to coach at least the last half or last couple of weeks of spring ball, just so everybody gets to know everybody. I'm talking about that running back room. That was intriguing to me too. That Ryan Day said he was running these things past the running backs. I mean, especially the two leading running backs in that room. That's an interesting situation, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I
I don't
was
know. I'm not sure what it means in terms of, well, just to get their take on these guys, but it's rare that coaches would include the current players in sort of the search process.
Yeah, I think so. And, but it's important to keep players happy, especially when you
Happy.
have two All-American running backs potentially on your roster. So I don't fault Ryan Day for it. And I think, the final decision will come from the top. I'm not worried about that. But it's good to let those guys have a little bit of an impact and let them know that their voices are heard. That's a thing that Ohio State prides itself on is
Yeah.
that brotherhood. And if you preach it among the players, you've got to preach it among the coaches and players. And I think it's a good
Yeah.
thing for Ryan Day to show he's willing to do that.
Spence, isn't it weird? I mean, you're even old enough now. You're still a young whippersnapper, but even you're old enough now to realize how different things are now compared to 5 years ago, because you've got another transfer portal moment coming after spring football is over. I mean, you got it. These guys just have to keep recruiting the guys they've got, right? I mean, it's such a weird time in major college athletics. Agreed. I mean, especially in the big time football and basketball realm.
Yeah, I mean, Ohio State basketball is going to go through it here soon when the season ends. Do guys test the waters? Do they stay put and try to go to the tournament next year? Football is no different. Guys are. I think there's going to be some surprising names across college football that enter the portal who people would think would be happy at their spot, but that's where we're at, Tim. And I don't think it's changing. I think it's just going to keep getting worse. I don't even know if legislation can help it. I don't know if employment contracts can help it because people break contracts all the time. So
Yeah.
I don't know what fixes it, but it's definitely going to be wild. The end of April is going to be a kind of a bananas period here for college football.
Hey, one other quick before we go. Somebody brought this up the other day, and I'm just going, I am intrigued by this. It was a recruit who was commenting, I think, that when you watch Ohio State's wide receivers going against the cornerbacks or going against the defensive backs in practice, ones versus ones, twos versus twos, it's an all-star show, right? On both sides of the ball. And this is an intriguing time, isn't it? Also in that regard of the talent that's on hand in those two rooms.
Yeah, Jeremiah Smith is going against Denzel Burke every day. Emeka Ibuka and Jordan Hancock from the slot. Brandon Ennis against Jordan Hancock and
Jermaine
Jermaine
Matthews.
Matthews and Davison Igbinosun and his length going against a guy a guy like Carnell Tate who's
Yeah.
kind of a freak athlete and Jaden Ballard trying to burn by everybody. It's it's intriguing, and we're finally going to get to see it on Saturday and see those kind of dogfights between the corners and the wide receivers. It's going to be exciting to watch, Tim.
Exactly. That's a student appreciation day, but also media appreciation day. MAD is what I call it. One time when you get out there almost right in the huddle, and it's pretty cool if they run it the same way. I'm very much looking forward to that. Well, hey Spiss, thanks for joining me, man. Let's get right into our I think our Ohio State favorite golfer, although Maxwell Maldeman's one of my favorites also, and I got to be around him last year a couple of times when he played in the U.S. Open. But here's Neal Shipley getting ready to play in the Masters. I mean, let's get back to it one more time, man. I've been there. I got to cover it in 1984. It's one of those few things I've told people that was better. The place was better from the standpoint of the shock and awe than I thought it was going to be, and I already had it in high esteem. Another place like that was the Rose Bowl. The first time I went there in 1984, that was a hell of a year for me. Now I think about it, covering the Olympics, but also first year I started covering Ohio State football full time and stuff. But there are a few places in life that are cooler than when you see them than what you thought they would be, and definitely Augusta National is one of those places, right?
I don't know.
I know I threw that up there just see how you'd answer that.
I put my name in the lottery every year. I've got a board with all my credentials on it for just to remind me, some of the places I've been in my career. At some point in my life, I'd like to have Augusta National on the credential board and cover that event, just like you did. But also a patron badge wouldn't be bad.
No.
I put my name in the lottery every year for a patron badge. If we have Lettermen Row listeners who have been there, let me know how it is because I would love to hear it. I love hearing the stories. But hopefully I have some stories of my own someday.
Yeah.
It's at the top of the bucket list. There are a few things that I uh, wouldn't do to be able to go there as far as sports go. Ohio State
Yeah.
spring game is this year on the Saturday of the Masters. If I had a patron badge, I'm sorry, but Ohio State fans, I probably wouldn't be at the spring game.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where, well, the consequences are the consequences, but I'm going to Augusta National. So it's at the top of the bucket list, Tim, and at some point I'll get there. I'm super excited for Neal to get there and not just play those practice rounds, but to be there and hit that drive off of number one.
Oh yeah.
It's
Well,
it's
you
gonna be fun
aspire.
to watch.
You aspire to cover golf to a certain extent. I mean, I think we're trying to expand that a little bit. Even at Letterman Row, and just maybe especially the local tournaments. I mean, it's a big deal, and we do a credible job, big time covering Ohio State football, and cover a little bit of local golf would be pretty cool too, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, the Big Ten championships are the weekend after the spring game. I think I'm going to go out there and report on that because Neal and Maxwell and a
And
couple of
Sauda.
guys. Yeah, at Scioto Country Club, like they've got a good chance to win the Big Ten for the first time in a
Yeah.
while. And the golf program is doing really well right now. And so we'll have a little bit of coverage of that Letterman Row. Obviously, football is always going to be the focus because we live in these houses because of Ohio State football, right? So
Yeah.
you know Ohio State football is king, and we always will understand that. But if a program is doing well, we're going to highlight it. The women's hockey program, we've got Letterman Row coverage of that from Monday morning. The women's basketball program, we were there for both tournament games and a few different games this season. We're trying to beef up that coverage a little bit more. So if a program's doing well, we're going to cover it, and the golf program is kind of the next iteration of that.
Yeah, and it helps when you got like Andy Backstrom, who loves college basketball. He's from the East, you know what I mean? He's got that in his blood, like you and I have football in our blood and golf, wide open spaces. Those are more wide open spaces. They're not just little gyms you go to when it's super cold in Boston in the middle of the winter. But you're exactly right. But hey, one other quickie I wanted to ask you before we go. Um, what do you ultimately think will be the impact of Chip Kelly on this offense, on this Ohio State offense? And I know that's kind of an obtuse question, but you and I've talked about this as we stood there on the sidelines at a couple of spring practices. The running game is going to be better. Don't you agree with that? I mean, some of the schemes are putting in new schemes for the running, but the emphasis on it too, big time. Just what is your take on that?
Yeah, Tim, I think he's going to be fantastic. He's got a great run scheme. He knows how to be physical. He studied the triple option for a long time. He had Ken Niumatalolo from Navy on his staff last year at UCLA. Like he
Yep.
knows what running the football means. And Justin Fry worked with him. He knows as well. So, Yeah, I just think the run game and the way that they're going to be able to run the football with these two backs is going to be, you can't talk about it enough. He's going to have such a big impact on the run game.
Yeah, the word option is definitely back in the Ohio State run game too. But hey, speaking of options, let's get to my conversation with Neil Shipley. Wow, man, am I honored and privileged and really excited about welcoming in this next guy, because people know if I could do anything in life, it'd be retire to a golf course. I'm semi-retired and nowhere near a golf course. But Neil Shipley, Ohio State Buckeye, U.S. amateur runner-up a year ago, about to play Augusta National, the Masters, I think for the first time. Welcome to the Tim May Show.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man, as you and I talk, I mean, it's a couple of weeks before the Masters as you and I are talking here, but you're actually getting ready to play a practice round the following day after our interview here. And you're in a hotel there in Augusta. And I'm just, before we get into what you're all about, I mean, just explain the excitement, nerves, anticipation, Christmas morning type feeling or Christmas Eve type feeling you're kind of having right now, getting to play the Masters for the first time.
Yeah, it's every time that I've come back to Augusta since the US Amateur, I've gotten more and more excited. This is my third trip down here now, and it's starting to feel real that I'm going to be teaming it up with all those guys come April, and it's such a cool venue and with all the history, and I just hope that I can play well and leave my mark as an amateur, and most of all, just enjoy the moment.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, I don't want to get too sappy Jim Nance like here. You know what I mean? Welcome, friends. But the bottom line, the first time you got to play Augusta National, I tell people I got to cover this tournament, the Masters, way back in 1984. So I walked around the course every day and took it in as best I could, because never knew if I'd ever be back, and I haven't been back. But the point is, I've made this point to people. There are a few places in life that you anticipate them being one thing, but they're so much better than you thought. You know what I mean? And the Rose Bowl is one of those, for example, But what was that experience like when you first walked onto the grounds there? And when was the first time you walked onto the grounds?
So the first time I was on grounds was in January. And it was a really cool moment because I had one of my best friends, Carter Pitcairn. He's going to caddy for me at the Masters.
Yeah.
And he caddied for me at the semifinals of the Amateur. And I've known him since, I mean, gosh, I was probably 13. He was probably about 10 years old. We grew up playing together at our country club. So it was just a super special moment to have us two in a car driving down Magnolia Lane, and just get to enjoy the walk around that property together. It's such a spectacular place, and obviously you have the hype around it, just because all the history and what's happened on the grounds, and every golf hole already before you even go there as an avid golfer. And man, it blew my doors off. It was just phenomenal. The golf course design is it's a masterpiece, and that's putting it lightly. Honestly, it's the best golf course design I've ever played. It makes you think in so many different ways, and it changes day to day based off of the conditions and the wind, and it's just it's so special. But man, my first drive down Magnolia Lane, I was maybe a little teary eyed. It was really cool. But then I got to the cul-de-sac, and I had realized that I don't know which way to turn on the cul-de-sac. So we did a little like 360 around the cul-de-sac once or twice before somebody came and grabbed us and told us where to go.
Yeah.
But it was and that day was great. But it's a cool place, and it was great to share that day with Carter.
Everything, I mean, everything in your golfing life to this point has been earned too. And is there a sense that you're not there, you're not just a fan, you're not a spectator, you earned your way, into this tournament and stuff. And I'm just, sometimes things are just given to a person and they don't really realize what it took necessarily to get there. But yeah, I think you feel like you've earned your way, right? I mean, do you have that sense about you?
Absolutely. Part of my journey through golf, from the junior ranks all up until now, I feel like everything I've had has been earned. Even just even this past summer, I had to earn my way into a lot of the big tournaments that I ended up playing. I had to earn my way into the U.S. Amateur. I had to, you know, earn my way into a Southern Amateur spot when I was, because I couldn't get into the field right away because my World Amateur ranking at the time wasn't high enough. And,
Yeah.
I earned my way into an invite into the Western Amateur, which is probably the second biggest event of amateur golf. Definitely the biggest event in the summer. So like all those tournaments, and that's coming from me who, when I was a senior in high school, I think I was ranked somewhere in the 200 or 300s in my class. I went to James Madison, which is they've had a solid golf program, but it's certain, and they've had a great run in athletics recently. Just made the March Madness tournament, but
Oh yeah.
they not really the biggest athletic department out there. Certainly nothing like Ohio State. And when you're at a place like that, it's you kind of carry a chip on your shoulder. You outwork the people who maybe have better facilities. And I think that's why at James Madison they've been really successful, is because a lot of the student athletes carry that chip on their shoulders because they're they feel like they've been overlooked. And so I certainly have carried that and tried to earn everything that I've gotten now. And just keep working hard, and you just keep getting better, and you keep beating guys. And that's a great thing about golf is there's no, you don't have like playing time like basketball or football. It's you go out there and you shoot the scores and you prove your way through things, which I think is probably one of the best parts about the sport.
Yeah, either that putt rolls in or it doesn't. And it can make or break careers, lives, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I'm just intrigued by your story all the way around, because like coming out of high school, tell people where you went to high school. Is in the Pittsburgh area, right?
Yeah, I went to Pittsburgh Central Catholic. So it's a private all boys school in Pittsburgh. One name that you might recognize who's an alumni is Dan Marino.
Never heard
That's
of
one
him.
of our,
Go ahead, though.
yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, I was on the high school golf team there, and we had a good team. We won a few state championships with them, a few district championships. I had teammates that were certainly better than I was at the time. My teammate Jimmy Myers, who's at Penn State, he cleaned my clock a lot in high school. So it was that was kind of my high school picture of things. And I played well around a lot of the junior events in town, but it was I wasn't the best junior golfer by any means in Pittsburgh.
Hey, who all offered you or came after you, or whatever, how you want to describe it, coming out of high school, Neil? I mean, from a school standpoint, who did, James Madison obviously ended up there. Did anybody else come after you at that point? I'm building up to something here, believe it or not.
Yeah, so I had a few offers at a couple other smaller schools. I was offered at University of Delaware. For a point in time, I was looking at Boston College, but ended up not getting an offer from there. I was looking at Columbia University in New York, the Ivy League, and got cleared by admissions, but didn't get a scholarship offer. And I was offered by University of California at Davis. So no, that's another great academic school, and
Yeah.
Coach Williams out there runs a great program, but decided not to travel so far away from home. And Coach Forbes at the time at James Madison gave me a good offer. I went on 2 or 3 visits, and if you've ever been out to Harrisonburg, Virginia, it's a beautiful town. The campus is amazing. I personally like to go hiking a little bit. I'm definitely a lot of fly fishing, and there's a lot of that around town. And
Oh yeah.
it's so it was a big draw, and ended up in Harrisonburg for my first 3 years of school.
Hey, and how would you describe it? Were you obviously you were happy there? You just described the scene. It makes anybody go there just to hang out, much less go to school and play golf. But did you, after your 3rd year, did you think, hey, I want another challenge? I mean, how did you end up at Ohio State? Just in a nutshell, I mean, how did you guys hook up, so to speak?
Yeah, so I kind of had to go back to the summer between my 2nd and 3rd year. I think late in my spring semester of my 2nd year at James Madison, I kind of put the numbers together and realized, like, hey, if I do summer classes this summer and summer classes after my 3rd year, I was going to get my undergraduate degree a year early.
Wait a minute. Your undergraduate degree in what?
quantitative finance.
Yeah, there you go. I want to get that in there. Go ahead now.
So yeah, so I got that early. And I approached coach about that. And like I loved Harrisonburg, and one thing about James Madison is it's a very undergraduate focused school.
Gotcha.
And to get into the MBA program or a lot of the other graduate programs, it requires work experience, which I had not yet acquired. So after looking around at some of the programs we have and kind of deciding that just academically it wasn't going to be right for me, I decided to enter the portal. And so I entered the portal in November of my third year, or October of my third year. And I had talks with JMU coach, coach Chavez at the time about it. And, it was a totally, just a mutual kind of agreement that like, like we know that this is best for you. And I think that's one of the great things about the golf program there. Coach Chavez, like he really cared about the players, and he, if he knew that if talking with my parents and going through things, like if I was going to have a better situation for myself academically somewhere else, where it was going to be better for myself, that it was a totally reasonable. So then I ended up talking to, when I went into the portal, I ended up reaching out to some guys on some teams that I knew. So I reached out to, some guys on other squads, but I reached out to Jackson Chandler here. And through that, kind of got in contact with Coach Mo. And, we went on a visit in October. Probably took about a month and a half, some other visits. And, but just decided that Ohio State was going to be the best fit for me, both academically and athletically. I had always planned on doing the specialized master's in data analytics program. And depending upon what happened that first year in school, I would kind of choose what my fifth year would look like. And then athletically, I knew I was going to have teammates like Jackson, Maxwell, Adam, Patrick, John, Eric, all the guys that have been there last few years. I knew that they're all great players and that they're going to challenge me a lot on the golf course. And part of the decision, I had offers at places where I knew I could start, but I wanted to go somewhere where I was going to be challenged, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to start, because if you can't beat your teammates on a week in, week out basis, then good luck trying to make it to the PGA Tour. So I felt like that first year, if I could make every lineup and play well in some tournaments, then kind of my plan on let's go all in on this golf thing. That was kind of the idea.
Yeah, but this is what I want to get to. So what happened between then and now? I mean, I play golf. Well, that's what I call it. I was extremely excited to shoot an 88 yesterday as we speak right now at the Ridge Golf and Gardens. You understand where I'm going with that? I hit like those 6 shots that make you keep coming back, thinking you could do that every round, every hole, etc. But my point is, you went from good, and I'm not, trying to blow smoke here, because we're, U.S. Amateur, you finished runner-up. We're going to get that in a second. One of the greatest shots under pressure I've ever seen, because I watched every, I love watching U.S. Amateur on television, and I could see your excitement too, but we'll get that in a minute. But what's just clicked here in the last year and a half or so, or year?
Yeah, well, I think I got on campus and I saw, what some of my teammates are doing really well. When I came to campus, I drove the golf ball great. I putted solid, short game is solid, but from like 100 to 150 yards, I would miss greens every once in a while. Like, meanwhile, Maxwell would just flag a lot of shots from 100 to 150. And, and then also with my long irons in college golf, we have a lot of par threes that are 200 yards or more. So, I would hit a lot of good long irons, but every once in a while, or more than every once in a while, I would, hit a pretty squirrely one and, end up making bogeys that way. And so I kind of learned pretty early, like, okay, if with my wedges, I needed to make a lot less bogeys and like give myself a lot more birdie looks. And then going in with long irons and long par threes, just make a lot more pars on those long ones and hit those more solid.
Yeah.
So that part of my game came around a lot over the winter, put a lot of work in on some things. And early that spring, my putter went really cold and we had some issues with it, but it started to warm up by the time we got to postseason, and, I still hit it just as good. And then, continue to putt well, hit it good all the way through the entire summer. And, things clicked at the US Amateur and we had a great week.
But when you're playing like the U.S. Amateur this last year, it's what I want to get to that semifinal match, which was historic in a lot of ways in my mind. Are you playing each round thinking, okay, this is the round where all this magic is going to go away? Or are you thinking, man, I'm onto something here. I'm riding this train. Well, what was that? What was that feeling like before each round as you progressed?
Yeah, at the US Amateur,
Yeah.
it was, yeah, so it was certainly, obviously once you get into like the round of 16, a lot of times it just feels like you're playing bonus golf. Like, that you had to beat so many guys to get to that spot, and a lot of things had to go your way. Like, quite honestly, there's, in stroke play alone, there's a few putts that dropped that, man, if they didn't hit the hole, it was probably 6 or 7 feet by. And then, there's a few putts like my putt on 17 against When You Ding that hit the hole and dropped. I mean,
Yeah.
that thing was screaming by the hole.
Oh yeah.
And there's a few others. So some things went my way, but, you know, I think one thing that we did a great job of in that moment was just focusing on our process through each golf shot, and staying in the moment, and just, you know, like with all the pressure and the people watching and the stage, you could get really wrapped up in that. But at the same time, you're just playing golf, and it's what I've been practicing all summer. And so I think that was good for us. And I think another thing that helped me was with my summer throughout the whole year. You go back to NCAA's, I was, a few shots off the lead going into the final round. So there's a lot of nerves there, obviously. And then I go into the next tournament, the Dogwood Invitational. I'm, a few back going into the final round, finished second. Going to the Sunny Hannah, I'm in the final group. You know, have a lot of, there's a really close match between Jackson Van Paris and I, and he ends up edging me out on 18. And then you can keep rolling down the list. The transmiss, it comes down to 17, and a playoff. And so I had dealt with all those pressure situations throughout the entire summer, and I had kind of gotten really comfortable under that type of pressure.
Yeah.
Because once you've been there so many times, obviously you get the adrenaline, you go, but you know how to play for that. And once you've been there before, you're not really nervous. It's just like you kind of get just kind of amped up. It's like you get really comfortable dealing with that type of stress.
Yeah. I was going to say, see, the word that comes to me is there was a boldness to your game in the U.S. Amateur, in my opinion, like like an audacity. I mean, like you were talking about, the putt, that one putt you hit that if it had missed it, hell, it might still be rolling. But you know what I mean? But it didn't. I mean, you had the guts, but also the confidence to just let it go. You know what I mean? Fire away. And that's what got me. But let's get to, I mean, because I don't want to keep you all day, but let's get to one of the great shots I've ever seen live or either on television. I think it was number 17, right, against the kid from Auburn. Do I have that right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yep.
his name was Marshall Butler, I think.
Yeah, John Marshall.
John Marshall, yeah. John Marshall Butler. But you're standing there, and this is do you sense it's a moment in time? I'm going to put my best, or did just everything come together? Explain to people what you're thinking about there. How far away are you? What have you got in your hand? I'm thinking you had a 7-iron. I may be wrong about that, but what do you have in your hand there? And go ahead.
Yeah. So I'd watched John Marshall Butler hit from a fairway bunker just off the green left, into a spot that I knew it'd probably be a 50-50 up and down. He could certainly get it close, but under that type of pressure, it wasn't a guaranteed inside 3 feet chip by any means.
Right.
And so I think we had about 114 yards. I had a 54-degree sand wedge in my hand. We had a little bit wind back in our face, and I had known from the practice round and seeing other shots that if we were to land this shot hole high, that it has the potential to spin back into the water, especially back into the wind, adding some spin onto the golf shot. So we had chosen a number that was going to be a bit closer to the back edge. And we picked a target probably 3 or 4 yards right of the pin, just to make sure that we're on the green putting. Because the biggest thing for us, and I think one of the big things in match play, is you got to continually put pressure on your opponent to hit good shots. So if you hit a ton of greens, you hit a ton of fairways, and you keep on the gas pedal that way, then your opponent starts to feel like, man, like, when's this kid gonna miss, or when am I gonna get my opportunity to win a hole? And so, that was kind of our mindset, and just sticking to our plan. And we weren't trying to hit any miraculous shot or hit it to a foot,
Yeah.
but I actually ended up pulling the shot probably about 3 or 4 yards. And when it came off the face, my initial thought was, man, just get back there and don't spin in the water, because I knew it was loaded with a ton of spin, and I just hoped it carried far enough back there where it wasn't going to come off the front and get us in trouble. And I saw it kind of just like nick the bottom of the shadow of the flagstick, and once I saw that and saw it stop, I knew that thing was tight and really good. And quite honestly, after that, I don't really remember much until I got up near the green. It was kind of a whirlwind moment. And honestly, just in amateur golf, it's a scene that I haven't I'm lucky to be a part of, but I haven't seen a whole lot of moments like that in the amateur game. It was really cool, and it was great to feel the support of all those people in Denver and the community at Cherry Hills and the country club there. They were awesome and kind of taking me in and making me one of their own for the week.
I'm gonna say, does a tingle come over you? Does a hair raise up on the back of your neck? And you got a lot of hair to raise on the back of your neck, but which is cool, by the way. I used to have that kind of hair long ago, but it's another story for another day, probably never told. But the bottom line is, what is it? Because you're slapping hands with people. You've just hit an almost life altering shot, because getting to the finals of the U.S. Amateur, all these invitation to the Masters, all this stuff comes with it. You've got to know all of that all at the same time, don't you? I mean, what you know what I mean? What was it like living that moment?
Yeah, well, honestly, I'd hit the golf shot. It went close. We went berserk. Like, that was awesome. And then I get to the green. John Marshall gives me gives me that putt,
Yeah.
For birdie, but he still has a chip to chip in. And my initial thought was like, okay, like, we need to
Premature.
zone back in.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to zone back in. Like, obviously, it's great to celebrate a shot like that, get pumped up, but like, let's reel it back in. On TV, you could probably see me talking to Carter, like, okay, look, like, if he makes this, we're going to 18. It's going to be a 3-iron or 4-iron, depending on the wind. Let's just hit that fairway. Let's hit that green, and make him make a birdie to beat us, and
Yeah.
take it to a playoff hole. And lucky enough for me, John Marshall ended up missing that chip. And, I had a great embrace with Carter. And that moment is something that him and I are going to cherish forever. I mean, I've already have pictures of it framed. Uh, and we both have some in real from the week. And then, I signed a bunch of autographs, and it didn't really hit me until, like, they took me up on a cart to head up the hill to the clubhouse. And I was like, wow, that was really cool. And I turned around to Carter, and I told him, hey, Carter, we have a tea time at effing Augusta in April.
Yeah.
And so that was pretty cool. And just like kind of realizing on that card up there, I was like, I got in the range, and I was just like, what happened? Like, it was like, it's the stuff that dreams are made of. And
Yeah.
I had driven by Augusta 2 summers ago when it's closed, and I was playing a tournament down here, and just drove by the place just to see it and maybe get a peek in. And it's still wild to think, probably back then, like, I was thinking, man, I'd be lucky to ever get to play in that tournament, or just play the golf course in general. To now, I'm in the tournament. I've got, I think I got a good chance to do really well. make some noise, and it's going to be a really special week. It's still surreal, and I don't think it's really going to feel real until I'm actually on property that Monday.
Yeah. Hey, but the other thing I was leading up to, though, you needed a shot at that moment. I'm talking about back in that second round, 17th hole. You needed that. You needed a shot, and you delivered that shot. And I would think you grow by leaps and bounds that in a moment when you needed something really special, you delivered. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, it's all these rewards came with it, but just because, golf is one shot after the other. It's not, it never stops, right? I mean, right now you're thinking about, your practice round at Augusta tomorrow as you and I record this. And it's just, but to know you delivered in that stage with that kind of pressure, and that's what I wanted to ask you. I like to ask people this. At that moment, before you hit that shot, did you feel the pressure that I'm talking about? You understand what, or were you in that little zone area where, they could have thrown a rock down there and you would have hit it close?
I think there's most certainly nerves over the golf shot. But I think I did a good job all week of trying to stay in my zone and in my process.
Yeah.
And like the nerves you get, I kind of treat it as just like another outside factor to a golf shot. Like if I'm nervous and I have adrenaline going, my 7-iron goes 194 yards normally. If I got a ton of adrenaline going, it might go 200 to 205, because I'm just going to be swinging it faster, and like you got to concentrate on your breathing and things like that. But I think getting back to it, like I'd put a lot of work in to improve on that part of my game. And to be able to deliver under that type of pressure just feels awesome because it's, you work all that time, when people, obviously you get to the stage and you're performing, but there's countless hours outside of that spent working, in all the work in the gym, all the work that we do, at the golf course in the winter, all the trips you take, all the tournaments you play, just getting ready for when you get that moment and get that chance.
Yeah.
So you're ready to take it. And, I had prepared really well for that week and I felt really ready to take on all those challenges. And, it feels great to be able to hit that shot under pressure. And when you do that too, and there's a lot of shots from that week that, I go back to, and it's like, you just remember like, man, I can hit those shots under pressure. I can really play, it's like a mini highlight reel for yourself. Just like it helps your confidence out. And, it's just, when things are not going great, you just remember like, look, I can do that still. Like I still have that inside of me.
Yeah.
So it's no, it was a special shot and probably definitely the most important golf shot of my life so far.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's been really cool to enjoy that and enjoy all the things that have come with that.
Exactly. I call those deja vu moments because for some reason or another, you've put so much work in. And then of course you add that to your deja vu moments, but you've put so much work in, you're not in a position of where you feel uncomfortable from the standpoint, hey, wait a minute, this reminds me of on the range, or whatever, or this shot at wherever. And it's really cool when you get enough of those, what do you want to call them, memories in your memory bank that you can just draw on at some of the toughest times in your career. It's really, really cool. I didn't mean to get all waxy there, but
No, I actually totally agree with you. And even at the amateur, I'm lucky enough. I grew up at a club that has firm, fast greens, really tight fairways, and we got on 11 during that same semifinals match. I was like 3 or 4 down after 10. John Marshall was just taking me to the woodshed at that point, and I had to start chipping away. And
right.
we got this chip, and I told Carter that like, hey man, this is like 1,000 chips that I've hit on any given hole at St. Clair Country Club. Like I'm gonna hit this one tight and just do what I do there. And I hit it to a foot, win that hole, and then all of a sudden we just start chipping away and chipping away, and we get to 17 and we're 1 up. So it's just little things like that. It's those deja vu moments, as you put it, like they're really helpful for us athletes when we're competing. To just drop back and say like, man, I've done this before, and this is normal. Like even though the moment is elevated, you know, what you're doing is the same thing that you've been doing back home, the same thing you've been doing in practice. So it's really like, and you just fall back on your practice and your preparation. And I think I did a good job of that week.
Yeah, I think it's unfair too that you can't play the Masters for fun, meaning play the tournament for fun, not just the course for fun once before you have to play it for real. You know what I mean? Because when you add in the people, which turn one of the most glorious sights standing there at like 18 and looking out over the grounds, from behind 18, it just looks like a sort of an interrupted pine forest, through there with these. But then you show up on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday of the tournament, and there are lanes you got to go through, like a bowling alley. You know what I mean? Of people, and it's just it's a totally different. It's like Indianapolis Motor Speedway when there's nobody there and there's 300,000 there. It's a totally different place, but yet, like you said, you got to tell yourself, but it's the same racetrack. It's the same golf course and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no doubt. But something that's interesting too that I've heard from 2 or 3 people so far, because it's just kind of like a bowling alley and you're gonna hit bad golf shots. There's so many people, like you almost have to like reside yourself to knowing that, man, throughout the week you're going to hit somebody.
Yeah.
And you're gonna have to deal with that, and it's scary. I did it at the U.S. Amateur before during my round of 8. I mean, I nailed a volunteer in the head on the first tee, and like I think I'm lucky that I've experienced that. I was obviously very concerned for him at the time, and it rouses you. But then like having the ability to like move on and be like, look, what happened. We can check on him at the end of the round, shoot him a text. But like, let's lock back in here. And so I think part of that challenge when it turns into a little bowling alley of people, it's going to be like dealing with that. And just another added thing about the Masters that I don't think a lot of people think about.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, that guy's probably walking around right now telling me, Neil Shipley hit me in the head. He's got a big knot there. He's probably got your autograph etched into it. Hey, last question. I've been lucky. I'm going on 70 years old now, and so I grew up in Alabama and then Texas, but I knew all about, for example, Jack Nicklaus and Tom Weiskopf and all those kind of things. But to be playing on a team like you're playing on right now, all you guys, you and Max, for example, y'all have already achieved a few things. You know what I mean? And does it feel like you're in a special group? I've been a volunteer at the U.S. Open the past 2 years, and I actually saw Max out there and interviewed him a little bit, even though I wasn't supposed to last year at LACC. But it's just, do you like I said, you come from James Madison, and then all of a sudden now you're on one of the elite golf teams in Ohio State history. If y'all really keep your act together, does it feel like that too? That you're in a kind of a special moment in place, not just the fact you're going to play the Masters, but this team you're playing with your last year at Ohio State, does it feel special?
Absolutely. I think we got a special group of guys. We got a bunch of seniors on the team that have put in a ton of work over the last 4 or 5 years, depending on if they're around for COVID or not. Yeah. And I think our team has faced a lot of challenges that have made us more resilient throughout the last few years. And I think that we're a bunch of hard workers, and like myself, we've had to earn everything that we get. We're not one of those SEC golf teams where, this is my personal opinion. I'll just preface it that I think a lot of the SEC teams, it's everyone's like, oh, SEC golf, it's so good. And yeah, there's a bunch of really good teams in there, but man, there's a bunch of Big Ten teams and a bunch of teams up north that, despite the weather and the winter and all those things, they got a lot of talented players. And I think when we get to La Costa in May, there's going to be a few, us or Illinois or maybe another team, from the Big Ten, creeping into match play. So it's we're, and we think we got the potential to be there. We think we can beat everybody, and especially when we're clicking on all cylinders. We have 3 of the best amateurs in the country with myself, Max, Adam. And then our 4 and 5 guy, maybe Jackson Chandler's been playing our 4 a lot. He's one heck of a player. He's almost made the U.S. Open a few times. He's played well in a lot of amateur events. He's got a great pedigree. And then, we've had a few guys jump around the 5 spot, but we have a new freshman who came in this January who's been great for us. He just won his first individual tournament at CPOMs just yesterday.
Is
And
that the Johnny O
he's
thing? No. Was that
yeah, the John,
yeah.
yeah. So it's the Johnny O is an individual tournament with some individuals guys who are playing, the
Yeah.
6 or 5, 6 spot on their college team. So, but I mean, for a freshman kid to go out and win a tournament, that takes a lot of guts, and you got a lot of belief in him, and I got belief in every guy in our room. So, really excited for what's in store for us. I think that when we get to Scioto for Big Tens, we're going to be really hard to beat, and I know that we're gonna carry a chip on our shoulders and try and outwork everyone out there because, especially us seniors, it's our last dance, and you don't get a lot of team golf once you turn professional. So it's gonna be really special to, be a part of this group. And I think, once it's said and done, I think we're gonna have a few guys from this team, playing on the PGA Tour. So it's really exciting, and hopefully I can be one of those guys on tour soon. So just got to keep on working hard.
Hey, last question I wanted to ask you. I want to let you go. Like I said, I've been a volunteer at the U.S. Open the last 2 years. What struck me about the U.S. Open, for example, the field, because it's a lot of guys there who qualify and who make it, based on merit, things like that. But what struck me was the driving ranges the last 2 years at Brookline at the Country Club, and then last year at Los Angeles Country Club. I tried to circle around them and maybe pick up a couple of stray balls. You know what I mean? After they've been hitting, there aren't any, or there are very few. It just tells you where you want to get, man. The tip of that mountain is really sharp, isn't it? I mean, there are guys ranked 300th in the world or whatever who are considered also Rans who are great golfers. Do you ever sit back and think for a moment, boy, this little sport you picked out, man, it demands every shot to be excellent.
It does. I think that as I've gotten higher up in the amateur ranks and played with more and more super talented people, and even played with some professionals, it's those guys obviously they hit it really pure, especially when they're hitting it good. But even if you walk down the range and you have a trained ear and you know what a good golf shot hears like, you hear a few clinks where you're like, that wasn't struck great.
Yeah.
So it's a lot more about managing those clinks and those misses and how well those guys do those things, because there's only a handful of guys in the world who hit it awesome every week. One of those being Scotty Scheffler or a John Rahm. Like those guys are just ridiculous, and at the top end of ball striking.
Yeah.
But to be a PGA Tour player and a really good professional golfer, there's a lot more that goes into it. There's a lot of aspects about the game, and you can beat a lot of guys with your mind. You can beat a lot of guys with your wedges and putter. And then on those weeks where you end up hitting it great, those are the times that you got chances to win. So it's just, hopefully those wins come at the right time and those good weeks come at the right time. And, that's a lot of it too in professional golf, is just timing it up right. And, good things happen when you play good golf. So
yeah,
just gotta, it's going to be a journey and, a challenge, obviously, because there are so many good players out there, but I feel really prepared and ready to take that on.
Yeah, I was going to preface with that too, is that it's not that these guys hit every shot perfect, but they rarely hit 2 crappy ones in a row. You know what I mean? And they all scramble, they all get out of trouble. I mean, it's just I'm talking about the elite, and it's what an interesting game. Hey, one last thing, Neil, before you go. Was there anything about the Masters grounds, about Augusta National, that caught you by surprise first time you showed up there?
Yeah, so I think something that's really interesting. I obviously everyone's heard that it's hilly and all that, and it is. But I feel like it's quite honestly a lot like a lot of Western Pennsylvania golf courses. So
Yes.
that didn't strike me, like it didn't really shock me too much. But I think that's something that's interesting is if you walk around the grounds as a patron and you're far away from the greens, it looks like there's a ton of undulation on them, and there is around the edges, but there's solid amounts of flat area on most greens to hit it. So you can hit some shots that aren't like not great and still hit greens. And so I think, picking your targets is going to be really important out there,
Yeah.
and managing yourself around the golf course. I wasn't aware of how many options you had off the tee at Augusta. You on almost every hole, you get to hit a driver, a 3-wood, or an iron if you wanted. There's a few where obviously it doesn't make any sense, like 11, you just want to hit driver. It's such a
Yeah.
long hole. But
Spend it.
a
Yeah.
hole, yeah, but a hole like number 1, you could hit driver or you could hit 3-wood. A hole like number 3, you could hit anything from driver to 6-iron, depending on the shot you want in for the second. I mean, a hole like 7, a lot of guys hit driver. Some guys are going to lay back to the slightly wider area with, like a 3-wood or a 3-iron. So, I think that's one of the parts about the property that makes me really love the golf course design, is that it's not a point and shoot golf course. It's not, you don't get up to every tee and pull out driver.
Yeah.
You really have to think your way through every hole. You got to think about where the pin is, what type of shot, where do I want to be hitting into that pin from, and what's the easiest way to get there.
Yeah.
And what type of club I want in my hand.
With your game. Yeah. With your game. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's with that, it's a huge challenge to figure it out. Especially once we get into tournament conditions, things change. So you're gonna have to be working on the fly there that week. But it's I think that was one of the, just something that really struck me. 2 things, I guess, with the greens and
Yeah.
just the golf course design and how it presents such a challenge to the player in terms of strategy.
Yeah, it's funny because when I came back from the Masters one time, I covered it. Well, what I told everybody, I said, the number 9 green, when you're down low and looking back up at it, coming up the fairway there, because you're headed back up the hill there,
Mhm.
I said it looked like a potato chip. I mean, but you're right. You hit a potato chip in the right spot, the dip's gonna hold on, So
Yep.
that's what it's about. Hey, Neil, good luck to you, my man. I really followed your career now for a little while, a couple of years now, but I've just it's been remarkable to see a guy in his early 20s really kind of latch onto something and just keep improving it. And I think that's what everybody who's watching you is seeing. I think you feel that way too, don't you?
Absolutely. I've had a game plan. I have a great team around me at Ohio State, but also kind of my own personal golf team. I have a great NIL agent who's given me a lot of guidance here over the last 6 months that I've been with him. I got a great swing coach that I've been with since I was 13, and I'm just trying to surround myself with great people who think I can do great things and are trying to point me in that right direction. And and on top of that too, I also have to give a big shout out to my parents, who have done a great job of supporting me throughout all the junior golf, now amateur golf. And it's not only a big time commitment for them, especially in the junior golf side of things, but the financial commitment is very large at the amateur level. It's expensive to play amateur golf, and been very blessed that they've been able to support me and allow me to chase my dreams.
Yeah, everybody needs somebody to make it rain. By the way, you just hit me on something I got to ask you. The summer you had last year, did NIL stuff just take off for you? I know you're not going to give me any figures, but have you been pleased? Let me put it that way.
Yeah, after the US Amateur, I was more, I think a lot of guys sometimes chase short-term gains and short-term NIL stuff, and I wasn't super worried about that, because in the golf space, you're lucky to get, if you're a guy who's just playing amateur golf, you might get 5 or 10 grand for certain things. And I'm more worried about creating a long-term brand.
Yeah.
That's my vision. That's Terry at Wasserman. That's his vision for us. We're partnering with people who, look, I might not get the most money now, but we're going to be partnering with people who are going to be supporting us through the next 3 years, and going to be, part of Team Neil, and want to be a part of Team Neil. A lot of people want to latch on to the just the next biggest thing, just real quick. But we're trying to build a team, build a brand, and I've been really excited about some of the opportunities that I've had come my way. And we're going to be having some logos at Augusta and wearing some apparel from, some I don't know if I can say it yet, because I don't know if we've actually we have the contract. It's gonna be, I'm gonna be wearing Nicholas brand apparel.
Oh,
so
never
that's
heard of
actually
it.
cool. Yeah, a little Ohio State connection. So that went through a few weeks ago. So we have good things down the pipeline, and just trying to create a brand and just get the word out and make sure everyone in the world knows who I am.
What was it on Kevin Costner's shirt? Something bail bonds. Remember that from the movie? But anyway, hey, Neil Shipley, good luck, my man. Great running into
Thank you.
And like I said, we'll do this again. Maybe not as long next time, because I know you're itching to go either eat or hit some golf balls. But I really appreciated this, brother.
Thank you. Appreciate you very much, Tim. And hope you guys have a good night, and hope to see you soon.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Neil Shipley.